Welcome to an episode of the podcast Art Insiders New York. My name is Anders Holst. The theme of the podcast is New York, with a focus on behind-the-scenes conversations with fascinating people who are making an impact in the world of art, design, and architecture. Maxi Cohen is an award-winning multimedia artist and independent filmmaker based in New York City. She has co-founded ART2HEART SOHO, which is an ongoing call for over 100 artists to bring optimism, healing, and love by painting messages on boarded-up buildings in the neighborhood that birthed contemporary art and that was heavily looted in a riot on May 31st. ART2HEART is collaborating with James Cavello of Westwood Gallery to curate future exhibitions of these pieces to benefit the participating artists and Black Lives Matter causes. Maxi Cohen also discusses her groundbreaking and inspiring documentaries, Joe and Maxi, a feature-length documentary about her relationship with her father, Anger, part of the 7 Sins, 7 Women film, South Central Los Angeles, Inside Voices, in response to the Los Angeles riots of 1992. From shock to awe, the story of suicidal veterans, ladies' rooms all over the world, and movement of water. So today, our guest, Maxi Cohen. Her films, photographs, and multimedia installations have been exhibited internationally and are in the permanent collections of numerous museums, including the Museum of Modern Art, the Whitney Museum, Museum of Fine Art Houston, the Israel Museum, and the National Gallery of Canada. And in the last week, you have also given us a gift to SOHO, the art exhibition of street art that breathes new and fresh air into SOHO, and that is very much needed. So thank you so much, Maxi, for giving us that gift. I read somewhere that you and Miriam were bicycling through SOHO and up came this idea. Is that true?
Yes. Well, I was here because I live in the community. I live on Green Street. So I was here the night of all this horrific looting on May 31st, with all the sirens and helicopters and shooting and screaming, and got up the next morning and went out and photographed what was left at Gucci and Dior and Coach, which was nothing, and saw the boards go up. And I thought, if there ever was a moment for artists to express themselves, it is now. And then I did go for a bike ride with Miriam. I mentioned it to her. She said, "Oh my God, you're so right." And I was just sort of saying it. I didn't know that she would say, "Well, let's make it happen." And she's that kind of person. She makes things happen. Yeah. And she galvanized a number of other friends of ours. And that's how it all started. She brought together a great group of people who are our friends. And it just kind of blossomed. It's funny because during COVID, I was watching it gave me a chance to watch social media much more, which I had not. And I kept thinking, how did these things go viral? How do things just pop up?
Well, and I then think you just did something here that went viral.
Exactly. And I was so surprised because I kept thinking, I have big projects, and I thought, how do you make these things just blossom like that? And I was so shocked. And then it just happened. It was so much flow and people were so responsive. I was surprised the first day we painted, 100 people registered. We had 100 people.
By the way, I met Miriam by coincidence. I was walking down Broadway and she was directing an artist or whatever, and she was going back to her own painting, I think. And then, so do people apply? Do artists apply? Do they call you up? Do they get an authorization? Or how does this work?
We just made a call to artists the first day. Miriam managed to get, I think it was Miriam or someone of this core group, because it was a core group. There's a woman, Bethany, I'm not going to say her last name properly. She has an ampersand. She has a handle, Go Paint the World. So she was used to painting the world. Misha Hyman, who made lunch, who said, I'll make lunch. He has the Warrior Health Project. Yeah. Said, I'll make lunch for everybody. Bethany, I think it was her. Anyway, they got Blick to donate paint. Okay. Or Miriam got Blick to donate paint, whatever. Somebody did. and House of Yes in Brooklyn had house paint and they brought it over. So I just spread by telling friends we were going to do it and them sending it off. We just opened it up to anybody. So we just said, just come. And it's interesting because some of the people who came to paint were very accomplished artists who made major public art installations, have had major museum shows, and some were 6-year-old kids who were happy to be outside painting.
Yeah.
And people who walked by in the neighborhood who had never painted before thought, oh my God, this is a relief, I'm going to paint.
Yeah.
We had people in their late 70s and early 80s painting of Black, brown, Asian. It was a very diverse group. By the second time we painted, we kind of made a mission statement.
So when did you start? When was the first time? Because this looting was at the end of the month, right? It was like May 31st or June or somewhere there.
Right. And the first day we painted, I'm looking at my calendar, I think was the 6th of June. The 6th of June was our first paint day, Saturday. So it was fast. I think Miriam and I were riding around on Monday. Mm-hmm. She has a tea company. She also had originally the Guggenheim in the 90s in New York was where Prada is at the corner of Broadway.
Yes.
And Prince. And so Miriam had a tea salon underneath, but now she kind of works upstate. And actually another friend of ours, Bobby Van, who lives in San Miguel Allende, she had called Miriam independently and said, I think they're doing this in Oakland or San Francisco. You should do it in New York. So Bobby also inspired. Miriam Noval is just a firecracker. She has a company called High Tea Today with CBD, tea with CBD. So she works upstate, and she galvanized our friends upstate, Stephanie Frank, and whose mother has a foundation. She told her mother, the Eileen Kaminsky Family Foundation that is out of Mana in New Jersey, Mana Contemporary. And her mom said, what a great idea. I'm going to help you. And and the man that she lives with is an artist who does billboards and public art. And so if you walk around the neighborhood, all the unlocked pieces are his, Gordon Kinlan.
Oh, yeah.
And then friends came down from Harlem who were in the art world, Gene Seidman, Barbara Ann Michaels. And then Miriam called Xiaoming Chen, who's a big Chinese art dealer, and she joined in. And then this guy, Timur York, came and he made a poster. And then we made a mission statement. And then we were a little more formal the second time. And another woman in the neighborhood said, oh, this is really great. How can I help you? I have 2 young kids, but I have great skills with spreadsheets. And I thought, spreadsheets, that's what we need. We need a spreadsheet. So Theta Sam came up with a way to register where everybody could put their name in and send their photographs in. So there was a way that we could keep track of which artists painted where and what their photographs were. And so it just kind of kept blossoming like that. And then so we painted again. Misha made lunch again. Bethany painted again.
What was in the mission statement, though? What was the essence?
You want me to read it? You want me to read it
Absolutely.
to you? Okay, I'm going to find it. Because we spent a lot of Zoom calls crafting this mission statement. Art to Heart, which is what we called ourselves. Art to Heart SOHO is a call to artists to bring optimism, healing, and love to our world by painting messages of compassion and unity on boarded up buildings, welcoming the change that's coming. So, the messages were range from very political to very spiritual. And everybody was free to paint whatever they wanted. That was where we started, so that we just didn't want everybody to just paint Black Lives Matter or I Can't Breathe, and to be a little bit more evocative or provocative. And there were some really deep, intelligent political statements. And Stephanie built a beautiful altar, that I have to say, She did that on the 12th. So today's the 22nd. 10 days later,
Yeah.
people are still burning incense. Nobody has touched anything. They just are adding things. And then she did another one on Broadway by the subway.
Yeah,
At Prince and Broadway.
Prince and Broadway. You know, I think it's so. What I got away with also was that there was a lot of love. There was a lot of motives of hearts and love and unity. It had a very positive,
Yes.
a serious and political message, but overall very loving and caring and positive, I think.
Yes, and that was our intention. That was our intention. The city has, was protesting every day.
Yeah.
And this neighborhood was so devastated by the looting that we felt we were definitely in support of the messaging that was going on in the protesting, or at least I was. I think everybody was. But we felt that what was important to uplift our spirits and the neighborhood spirit was more messaging that about, more of that sense of we need unity, we need love, we need compassion. I did a couple pieces. Pessimism is an indulgence, despair is a lack of imagination.
I took a photo of that. It has a very nice pink, bluish color, right?
That's right. That's right.
I love it.
And then I did love is the answer. But everybody always says that. But if you really think about it, it really does make it. If everybody came from love, we wouldn't be in this mess. We would have this sense of unity and equality and compassion and tolerance and we would applaud difference. So
it was so nice because that was our first thought when we went out. Is that the artists are reclaiming Soho. They're coming back with a vengeance. They're taking over in a very positive and wonderful way, because you go there with all these high-end shops and. Soho needs that art component. I mean, otherwise it loses its soul in a way,
It's the artist who first lived in Soho that, in a way, gave this energy to a place that ended up being what it is today. There were artists here first, then there were galleries and restaurants, and then, finally Gucci and Tiffany and Dior and Coach. And you're absolutely right. And what was so great was that people were painting from their heart.
Yeah.
It wasn't about money on top of places that were about money. Mm-hmm. And it absolutely brought back some soul and some human creativity and the human touch. And the neighbors really appreciated it. I wasn't sure what would happen. Somebody the first day came, said he looked out the window, he had tears in his eyes. He came down, he was so grateful. And I was happy because, I didn't know, maybe people preferred the minimal look of all the plywood, but I was very happy to see that people were really in the neighborhood grateful. People really did. People stopped by, they joined. And I think it made a big difference.
Absolutely. So you started on the 6th, and then it went on like the second week. You did your mission statement. More people came about. And what happened the third week?
Oh, so we and many of the artists came out anyway in between the time. For us, it was really Stephanie Gordon and myself and Miriam that kept lugging the ladders and bringing the paint back and forth. And, it was like, oh, my God, I can't believe what we...
So everybody used the paint that was offered to them. People didn't come with their own paint. They were
some did. Some did. Some more serious artists did. Some brought stencils. And, a number of the artists that, really, there were a number of serious muralists, serious artists, and they did bring their own supplies, or they, mixed our supplies and their supplies. And then actually it's interesting because James Cavello, who owns the Westwood Gallery on the Bowery, one of his artists, a spectacular artist, Nobinaga-sawa, hope I said that right, huge public artist who's international, was painting the second time we came out, and she brought her students the third time that we came out. And he came over and he saw it and he said, he's part of the Broadway, the bid, whatever
Yeah,
that
yeah,
is.
yeah, the bid, yeah.
And he said, let's paint Broadway. Let's really curate Broadway. You know, the artists are really serious and doing spectacular work. Why don't we bring them to Broadway?
Yeah.
So call the stores and make sure we have permission, because I would hate to see somebody paint all day and all night and then in the morning it's gone. And he did that. And he also, I mean, I'm hoping all this is the case, because that's what we're counting on, found a place to store the art, because we had the idea that, and I walked the New York Historical Society through here, right? So it'd be great. It is a specific moment in history. It will be.
It is.
And so it would be great if we had the work, if anybody wanted to exhibit it or to auction it off to benefit charities and to the artists. So we agreed, James agreed, that nobody else would benefit but charities and the artists, and that he had found, which I'm hoping gets confirmed today, a place to store the art. And that's you'll see that the art on Broadway was great, right?
Yes.
It was really, the artists were artists who have painted in the interior of Soho. I mean, there you have artists. One of the guys that painted with us the first time, Tristan Reginato, he organized, I think, former students of his, a lot of African American artists, and they painted beautifully on Broome and up Worcester. And so if you walk from Grand Street up Green and around Worcester, up Worcester Grand, you know, there, and then we expanded through Spring and Broome and Grand and West Broadway. It was like an open air museum. So a number of the artists who had been painting in the interior of Soho went to Broadway and painted on Broadway. We put the call out again, and and that's how that happened.
So your colleague, the gallerist, he calls these companies because you need their permission, right?
We did not get any permission in Soho because we didn't know who to call. It was, and really, I don't think they were. I'm not sure they were up for talking to us because they had to deal with a store that had just been looted. So we just painted wherever. And some of the stores have been, now I've been running after all the stores and running out my door to kind of keep saving the art.
Yeah.
And some of them are very thrilled that we painted and are very happy to donate the work to a cause. Otherwise they really own the plywood. And some of them just took it off and had it all junked. Or I noticed Chanel, they just keep painting over art. And I feel really badly because some of it is real art, really incredible art.
Dolce & Gabbana, that beautiful orange whirling pattern. And so you had the juxtaposition between, the fashion company and then the street art below it. And I thought that was so great. So you're right. I mean, the board is owned by the store itself. So are you now collecting these boards?
Well, I've been running around trying to save them. I mean, I found a construction company in front of Jimmy Choo that took them down, and they were just about to take off. And they said, well, if you find a good charity or whatever, we'll bring them back. I asked them to hold on. We've been asking the stores. I've been writing letters and making phone calls. Sometimes we've been successful and sometimes not.
Yeah.
So, but we're doing our best to really, the work that really needs to be preserved. I mean, look, nobody painted with the idea of it being there forever. And so I'm glad we photographed everything. I mean, a woman came by and borrowed paint because it was in my basement and painted a beautiful painting. She came at 8:00 at night. I went out the next morning to see it. It was already gone.
No.
And I actually put something up on Broadway, and the next morning it was gone. We're just doing our best to rescue the art, and we're hoping that the bid will hold on to the art so that it can be secured, and that something can come from it.
Yeah, you would basically need a lorry to drive around in Soho and stack them on the on the back.
Well, that's what I asked. That's what James Cavello, who's been organizing this,
Yeah.
I said that's exactly what I suggested to him.
Yeah.
So, I mean, I ran out. I saw this morning art being taken down of a piece on Grand Street that this woman, Ariana, painted 3 beautiful panels. And she did a beautiful one up on Green Street in blue. And I thought, this can't be trash. She spent I mean, it was magnificent. And, I called and tried to figure out what are we going to do. And then her father came, I think, with a truck or something, at least. So her art got saved because it was just too fabulous. But a lot of it is getting thrown away.
Yeah.
So it's very ephemeral.
So what do you need then? You need volunteers to take 1 block each and stand guard for the art here.
What a great, yes. I do give my cards out and say, if you see any art being taken down, call me immediately.
Yeah.
If you want to help us create that brigade, it would be great. But yes.
So
yes.
Are the stores opening up now? I mean, you are right there in the middle this Monday, or is it just a slow opening?
I think it's a slow opening. Some of the stores that were looted, I'm actually surprised at how quickly they could restock. Most of these stores in Soho, which are so high-end, I don't think they have many people coming in at one time anyway. They're not like the stores on, Broadway, I think it's much more. But, so I don't know. I haven't been on Broadway this morning because I'm hoping that the bid is going to watch over Broadway. I'm sort of been driving my bike all over Soho. I've gone out 3 times today when I hear...
You need an army of helpers here,
Yeah, we do.
Yeah.
But I'm hoping that the bid, and I think James Cavello is looking over the work on Broadway to protect it.
Oh.
And the work on Broadway is really quite spectacular. I think it's spectacular. Prince Street between Worcester and West Broadway is unreal. It's just, this is really, there is museum quality work there. And what I think is so interesting is the Museum of Contemporary Art in LA did an exhibition on street art. And, it was the #1 attended show they ever had at the museum.
Wow.
And I thought that was so interesting. Have you been outside today?
Oh, I was there Saturday for 3 hours, and then I came back for Sunday. And I can tell you, it was so beautiful. I think I took about 185 photos or something like that.
Oh my God.
And, you were hanging out with the artists, and it was a very open and wonderful conversation. And everybody says, this is like what Soho should be like. This is what it was meant to be. Now it's sort of
It's what it was when I first moved here. That's what gave me this idea.
Yeah.
So it reminded me of the days when I first moved to Soho, and everybody that you saw was really people who were within sort of the same age as you.
Yeah.
There was, a similar demographic. They
Yeah.
were all artists. And at 3 o'clock in the afternoon, there was no commerce anymore. It was dark. And this, when all the boards went up, it reminded me of those days.
I talked to this woman. She did this Sam Cooke painting.
Oh, Claire.
Yes, Claire.
Beautiful painting.
Oh.
Beautiful, beautiful painting.
And then she told me, did you see the bird cage, the bird...
on Green Street.
On Green Street. I said, that's one of my favorites too.
So I think it's really great that we're having this conversation because I'm hoping that the businesses on Broadway will see the value of the art and the value that this expression is worthy of preserving and worthy of auctioning and that it's worthy because it's an historical moment.
Yes, it really is, and you can feel that when you were walking the streets. Why wouldn't one turn this into maybe an annual art festival where one could have some kind of public display of street art in this way in Soho to sort of reinvigorate the neighborhood and so on and so forth. Have you discussed that at all in this group?
No, I think it's a great idea. That's how this is happening. Last night I was talking to an artist on Broadway at 10:30 at night, and he said, well, if we sell the art, can we pick our own charity? And I said, we haven't even had that conversation yet. I think that's a great idea. And that's sort of how this has been happening. So I do believe that I'm going to bring that up. You may have spawned a new idea.
Well, I think we need to do something with Soho and why not honor the heritage here, but with art?
I think that's a great idea. Soho is really the birthplace of American contemporary art. When I first moved into the neighborhood and the trucks left at 3:00, the end of the rag trade and whatever businesses were here, iron workers or whatever. The people that you saw on the street were kind of around your age. They were really all artists. I mean, it was really a community. I'm a filmmaker and a videographer, and what was so interesting now, which I haven't seen in years because of the commercialization, for me, what was so moving is to see who was walking around in the last couple weeks, realizing that there are artists who I've seen in museums and art fairs who I'm a huge fan of that I didn't know lived around the corner from me. That there are tons of artists in Soho. And what's really also really interesting, because you mentioned Claire's work that you liked so much, and she's one of them. There are children of the original artists that settled in Soho that have felt such a deep connection to painting here because they grew up here. And Claire was one of those artists who grew up here as a child, who really felt a deep connection to the community because she was here when they were, that's the environment she grew up in.
So how long is this going on for now? Is it like an open-ended process, or is there a final date? You're making this up as you go. I find that so interesting. It's wonderful.
Yes, and the thing is, I think it's going to last until the stores open and all the plywood is down. Artists were painting last night. Artists were asking me, which buildings do we have permission to paint? Came out at 8:00 this morning to paint. I've had a guy who's borrowed my ladder every day to paint. He's there. He came, brought it back last night at 10:00. He came and he picked it up this morning at 10:00.
Yeah.
And he's painting it at Prince and Broadway.
Yeah. But it's so interesting because I went to Ian and he had a little party. So we went down to get some fresh air. And there was one of the guests with his acoustic guitar, and we were singing along. And there were two artists opposite the street painting, and they joined in, and we were singing. So I thought to myself, this is an incredible New York moment. And you see, art has this wonderful ability to bring people together. Really a wonderful little moment there, when we all came together.
It was terrific because there's a mural at Spring and West Broadway that this guy Trevor made. There was a violinist, a classical violinist, an African-American violinist at that corner, and another one playing a cello at the next corner. And then I heard that there were dancers in the street, like choreographed dancing. And then I have a video of a guy who did a spoken word piece as he was painting. And then somebody got engaged on the street in the midst of it that was painting. And I thought, how amazing that this environment created that level of creativity and joy, which I think did not in any way lessen the multi-dimensional or the the multi-messaging that is being said and made,
How will this be documented then, though? Because I know that you are a very celebrated, award-winning multimedia artist and independent filmmaker. So how do you document this? This should be straight up your alley.
It should be, but I haven't had as much time to do it as I would have liked. And there hasn't been money to really hire somebody to film it. There have been a number of professional photographers who have been photographing. It is my intention to aggregate that material. And somebody actually called me about a book. So I'm talking to her this afternoon. There were a couple people who were out there shooting video, and I'm trying to aggregate that material so the story can be told. If they're, if the work is going to be exhibited, then I think the story is very moving to see those images. And I have been photographing and filming in the neighborhood as best as I could through, I was isolated, COVID, from the beginning of when the plywood went up, and from even before that, when there was some art in the neighborhood that was COVID related, so we're working on it. It's like, let's finish painting before we, it's like, it's everything at once. How do we document it? How do we aggregate it? How do we edit it? How do we paint it? It's everything sort of at once.
Can you tell our listeners a little bit about yourself and the work that you've done and been involved in?
Oh, my. Okay. Well, I started basically as a filmmaker and a videographer in this first wave of people who did video making, kind of guerrilla television and television for social change. And, I'm proud of the fact that I did a TV series in a small town in New Jersey, Cape May, New Jersey, that didn't have any local television. And that as a result of people making their own television, a Democratic mayor got elected for the first time in 100 years, which was not what's important, but the town went from being destroyed to becoming one of the first landmark towns in this country, one of 4 landmark towns in the country in Cape May, New Jersey. And I also, so I've been very interested in television for social change. I did a film during the LA riots, which was where I gave cameras to African Americans, Latinos, and Koreans who lived in the areas of the LA riots to try to understand racism from a firsthand perspective from the inside out, which that film played on Showtime. I think it was the first film ever made by real people that was on television. But what really shocked me about what went on now is that I felt like we hadn't really moved. I felt like it was that Rodney King moment, the LA riots all over again, only on a much more explosive scale. Always wanted to be an artist. And so, but I went to film school. So my first feature documentary film was a film I did called Joe and Maxi about my relationship with my father, which was kind of a breakthrough in its form. My favorite accolade was somebody asked me at a festival, who played your father? So I thought, if I made a movie that was so real, he thought it was fiction. That was the biggest compliment I could have. But in those days, also, it was a time when foreign films were being released much more than American independent. So I was part of this American independent film movement that helped to foster the exhibition, the distribution, and production of independent feature films. At the same time, I continued to make art because it takes so much time and energy to raise money to make independent films. I feel like I wasted 90% of my life trying to raise money, to be quite honest. And it used to be easier. I was very lucky. I'd get grants from the National Endowment for the Arts, or the film I made in LA, the Rockefeller Foundation supported. But really, it's just, unlike in Europe, it really is very hard for independent filmmakers to make movies. So I've also do large format. I do photography, I do video that have both single channel video, and now I've been working for the last 25 years actually photographing water around the world and filming it and making multimedia works that incorporate video of water, and furniture even that incorporates video of water, and multimedia installations. And I've designed big public art project called The Movement in Water, which is a kind of mini, or who knows if it's mini, it's so expensive it doesn't feel so mini, a kind of mobile museum of water because, when COVID passes and hopefully we'll have a lot of social change this year in terms of racial injustice and systemic racism, when all this is passed, really the major issue that we're dealing with is the environment.
Yeah.
And it will rear its head as it is rearing its head. And so that project, its mission is to create a greater reverence for water and to shift your physiology, which I think, once we open again, or as we open again, or at some point, people will, I think, have a greater reverence for nature and will want to be together. I anticipate that this project of a movement in water, which it's very interesting about water. All our molecules are 99% water, and our bodies are mostly water. The new science about water shows us how water has memory and connectivity and consciousness. And yet water is also the solvent that can do the most for dealing with climate change. Actually, I have a very exciting project for SOHO that I think would be great for the community that I hope we get to make. So I'm doing that, and I made I executive produced a film recently called From Shock to Awe, which is about how ayahuasca can really help. It's with veterans who are really tried to commit suicide several times with PTSD, help with PTSD. And I will tell you that there's a lot of PTSD that's coming out of all of this. So there's a lot of trauma. And so I'm hoping that the work that I'm doing in both these areas with water and how we can really heal and shift consciousness, and I just think there's an enormous amount of healing that needs to happen.
Yeah. Well, that is wonderful. I have to say, I was very impressed when I read about all the various productions you have been involved in, and the idea behind them, and what they're all about. And you also had this ladies' room around the world that stuck out, and I was thinking that sounds like a very interesting project. What was that about?
Well, it's interesting. Way before this project has been going on for, oh God, this really dates me, over 40 years. And when I made my first film, I was in one of those awards dinners in Miami that was really boring. And I went to the ladies' room and found this octogenarian with her corset and her false eyelashes, and I started photographing. And the truth is, the ladies' room is a place where women share and actually reveal things to total strangers and make friends. And so I started photographing this tribal dance that happens in ladies' rooms around the world as far as I had gone. And then there was a point way before Facebook and MySpace that I thought, what if the world knew the secrets of women? What difference could it make? And I had that idea, and I was I was making a film in the Australian outback. I walked into an Aboriginal bar. I think I was the only white girl in this bar. And the women called me over to sit with them. And then they wanted to talk to me, and they were afraid the men might overhear them. And they took me to the ladies' room to tell me about the incest of little boys and little girls that was going on in their community, and really wondered if I could help them. And that began a film that I made at the same time, make filming in ladies' rooms around the world that, dealt with everything from women sharing their vibrators at a sexuality conference to women's rights and celebrating women. So this project has been going on for 4 decades.
That's wonderful. Can you describe your style? It seems to me as it's very sort of authentic in the moment, catching people, not so much polish. And I saw some movies online here. How would you describe yourself, your style?
First of all, I think that is true. But secondly, I have always been interested in how do we tell a story. So the form in which a story is told has to be commensurate with the intention that you have in telling that story. So when I was in LA, for example, wanting to understand racism, I gave the cameras to people who lived in the community and had them keep, ran a workshop and had them keep a diary of their own. When I was asked to make a film for a film called Seven Women, Seven Sins, that seven women filmmakers from around the world were interpreting the seven deadly sins any way they wanted. So some were fiction and some were like music videos and some were experimental. And mine was the only documentary piece. And I was given the sin of anger. I wasn't really sure what the sin of anger was. So I tried to ask the Pope and I tried to ask a rabbi and didn't get very far. So I put an ad in the Village Voice looking for angry people. And actually, it's interesting because at the time people said, oh, you can't make a film of talking heads. I recorded these people telling me about their anger. And it's in this feature film of seven women. It's the longest film. And when people lined up around the block to go see the film, they came to see Chantal Akerman's film, which was on laziness. So her film was really about being lazy. And I think her film was the shortest. And
of course.
really, really shocking that they thought that mine was the shortest and that was the longest. Yeah. So it really proved to me, if you're keeping an audience compelled, that's what's important. So usually, what I really am looking for is what is the story I'm telling, and then how do you tell it? What is the best way to tell it?
So you interviewed a lot of angry people. Now, were they angry really, or did they just think they were angry? When they met you, they, mellowed out?
No, they were so angry that I didn't know whether my idea would even work. So I pre-interviewed them. I set up a day to shoot in a studio. And they were so angry that I was afraid that, they had already told me their story once. Maybe they couldn't do it a second time. But their anger was so pervasive that they could very easily tell me the same story again. And I'm sure they've told it a million times. And actually, the film is really, it's available. It's really interesting. And, this is so funny. There was a man who called me up and he said, I saw your film in film school 25 years ago. Yeah. And there's an image in that film that is seared in my brain. And I just got funded. I think it was one of the producers from This American Life said, I just got funded to do a podcast called Heavyweight. It's a Gimlet podcast called Heavyweight. And he said, I want to find the people that were in your film from 25 years ago and find out what happened to them. Yeah. And he tracked them down. Yeah. And I was sorry we didn't make a film of the podcast, which is really interesting because it's a 45-minute podcast with some of the most extraordinary interviews that happened. I remember also the Museum of Modern Art calling me saying, we hear there's a guy in your film who committed murder, and we think it's our projectionist.
No.
and they wanted to see the film. So, and one of the guys who I was so moved by, we actually did Simon & Schuster did a book. I had them, we did a book after. He was a cop. But it was a detective who came from a family of mafioso. And he was very upset that he was the 11th highest decorated cop in New York. And he felt so betrayed by the police when he found out that his phone had been tapped. And then many years later, or some years later, he had, it was allegedly, 16 murders or something. And the people were angry. They were so angry. But it's so interesting how it was expressed. So it's actually quite an interesting film. Won a lot of awards.
I saw a professor a couple of days ago on TV. He said it's very important to have positive thoughts, and that's it brings up your wellness, antidepressant, and so on. What did you learn about anger? What is anger good for? I mean, did you come to any conclusion here?
I did, because I had to figure out what anger. I'm not an angry person, and I didn't understand what it meant to have the sin of anger. I didn't understand the 7 deadly sins, and that's why I wanted to get the Pope or an Archbishop. But but what I decided was people who were so angry that they were hurting themselves or somebody else. That was what made it a sin. That was my definition of what made it a sin. If you ask me personally, I feel that anger should be channeled. It shouldn't be suppressed. It should be understood and expressed, examined all the way through, and ultimately turned into something that's of value.
Yeah.
Which I think in a way gets back to the painting in the street, for a lot of artists.
Yeah. I think you're right. This is this is wonderful. You have a very interesting career. I was reading about you, and I thought, wow, that is very interesting. So,
I do think it's good to thank the sponsors. So can I do that? We were very, very grateful to have the sponsorship of not just Blick for paint and House of Yes for paint, but really Eileen Kaminsky's Family Foundation really sparked us, and also the ESKFF, the Nest, which is Stephanie Frank, her daughter, and the Tea Salon, Miriam Noval, who's incredible tea, the CBD, her CBD tea, High Tea Today, and the Tea Salon. And I think I mentioned that Misha Hyman, who has the Health Warrior Project, contributed. I do have to say there were amazing, wonderful artists, and we're very excited that the bid will really take a role in helping the artists and charity by preserving the work. And that's really thanks to James Cavello of the Westwood Gallery. I have to say it's quite remarkable, because people came away from as far away as Boston to paint, and Brooklyn and Long Island and whatever. I think that spirit of recognizing SOHO and wanting to bring this to SOHO was felt from close and from afar. It's interesting. I just want to say one thing. I asked a lot of artists who said, "Oh, I'm from Jersey City," or I live in Bed-Stuy or Fort Greene or Crown Heights. Why did you come to paint here? And I think they recognized that it was desolate from the looting, that it was all boarded up, but that also there was a kernel of this is the place to paint, that this is the birthplace of something of art in many ways, in contemporary art.
That's very well put. This is the beauty of podcasts, because when I was walking around Saturday, I said to myself, I have to get the persons behind this on my podcast. And I found your email, and I emailed you, and you said, sure, just give me a call. And then, so from Saturday to Monday, from idea to execution, that's a record for me at least. And thank you so much, Maxi, for helping me to do this. And I will do my part. I will put this on the front burner and make sure to spread the message. Can I ask you a question though about ART2HEART? So that is, it's an Instagram page. I saw that. Is there also a website?
We did get a website called ART2HEART.art, and I haven't had time to see if we filled it out, so I'll have to check. And I think we do have it. So I think our intention is, I'm going to make sure in the next 10 minutes we're going to be on that.
Okay, wonderful.
And you can find the art on Instagram at hashtag art with the number 2 with a heart, and art with a number 2 and a heart, SOHO, and then at ART2HEART written out .art.
Yes, I saw the last one. I'm following that, but there are 2 others then.
Yes, people have been posting at hashtag art, the number 2 and a heart.
I see.
Thank you. That's how this whole thing has been happening. Thank you so much.
Congratulations again.
Okay. Take care.
You too.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
This is Art Insiders New York, and my name is Anders Holst. Thank you for listening, and be sure to visit artinsidersnewyork.com to join the conversation and subscribe to the podcast. If you enjoyed this episode of the Art Insiders New York podcast, head over to iTunes, if you're not already there, to subscribe, rate, and leave a review. It's very much appreciated. Thank you. This episode was produced by UOM LLC, copyright 2020.